joining us on the program, Tatiana Kukareva, Deputy Head of Sputnik News websites and radio, joining us from Moscow at this point. We are also being joined by Dr. Mridula Ghosh, International Affairs expert and board chair of the Eastern European Development Institute and a senior lecturer at the National University at Kiev Mohila Academy. Dr. Tara Karta, former director of the National Security Council Secretariat, is with us, as is Dr. Diksha Pandey, who was in bunkers all night. She's a senior resident in neurology at the Sumy State University in Kiev. But let me begin with you, Tatiana Kukareva, and ask you about the latest developments that international media is now reporting. The fact that President Putin now appears to have put Russia's deterrence forces on alert.
Well, he has, and the message here is clear. It's the same message that has been coming in from Moscow all this time, that the West should stop escalating and should stop its threats towards Moscow.
Right. Russian ground forces have pressed into Ukraine from the northeast and south, but they've encountered fierce resistance, Tatiana Kukareva, from Ukrainian troops. Has the intensity of this surprised Moscow? Ukrainian authorities claim that Russian troops are demoralized and exhausted, and fog of war aside, we're all seeing visuals also of Russian forces suffering huge losses. I have to ask you, has Russia failed to achieve its objectives in the first 4 days of this war?
First of all, let's set the record straight. I'm looking at what you're showing right now. Unfortunately, almost 80% of all of this footage cannot be authenticated for now, first of all. Second of all, we've already learned just how much the Ukrainian side are spreading misinformation about this operation, because, you know, even the situation, the most, shocking situation for me was the situation with the border guards that were guarding the Zmyiny island just off of Odessa, that the President Zelensky actually announced that those people have been killed, and he gave them awards post-mortem. Whereas we've actually seen footage of those people. There are 82 of them. They're alive and well. They have been brought to the Russian city of Sebastopol. They had surrendered. They have been given food. They have now signed the agreement not to participate in any military activity anymore. So we've encountered a great deal of misinformation from the Ukrainian side. As for the demoralization, well, you should see the videos coming in from the other side, you know.
Tatiana Kukareva, Kiev, Kharkiv, Lviv still remain independent. You were not seeing Russian troops now taking over these major Ukrainian cities yet. Surely that is indication of something. Sorry,
very simple explanation for that.
Yes.
And I do believe I told you about this even yesterday, that, for instance, in the city of Kharkiv, I do believe I showed you pictures, I think. In the city of Kharkiv, military forces of Ukraine have actually put missile launchers in the middle of residential areas. Russian troops have been and will continue to try to avoid civilian deaths as much as it is possible. And unfortunately, when faced with terrorist tactics, as is putting heavy military equipment into the middle of residential areas, of course, then, you know, they would have to find another way.
With Ukraine agreeing to talks in Belarus now without preconditions, are we at all likely to see some kind of possible pullback now?
I am very, right now, reluctant to analyze as per the agreement to talks, because the Ukrainian side has been dragging out those talks for as long as they could possibly do that. They barely agreed in the last moment, and they're setting up more and more preconditions to those talks. The Russian delegation waited for them for 24 hours. We've offered talks since day one. Since day one, the president has said that the Russian side is very open for talks. The only thing we're trying to do is we're trying to decapacitate the military that has been carrying out a severely deadly operation in the independent republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. Unfortunately, the Ukrainian side has been dragging out those talks, and the images that you're showing right now, that's a very big proof that for some reason, one or the other, Kiev just doesn't want those talks to happen. They just want to drag this conflict out, and they do want as many civilian deaths as possible to then blame them on Russia and to just, prove the fact that this is pure aggression and that Kiev has nothing to be blamed for whatsoever.
Tatiana Kukareva, do stay with us. I'm going to bring the others into the discussion now. Dr. Tara Karta, former director of the National Security Council Secretariat, is also with us. The fact that President Putin has now ordered nuclear forces on high alert, at what stage do we need to ask ourselves whether we are potentially dealing with an irrational leader?
I would hesitate in calling him irrational. I would say he's probably under a lot of pressure. I mean, he wanted to finish this off, the whole situation off in a couple of days, and that's not happening right now. I would agree with what she said earlier, that there is a lot of disinformation going around. We're not sure. But the fact that he has taken this step in saying, I will bring in my nuclear forces, shows that he wants to force these people into talks. Now, having said that, what is curious is that, in most conflict situations, the internet is shut down. Here, the internet is still working, which is why I'm saying this war is being fought on disinformation. So it's very difficult for an outsider when you're hearing only one side of the story, which is the Ukrainian side, which is coming on most channels. We're not getting to see the Russian side. Most of the Russian sides are blocked. I'm not saying one is right or the other is wrong, but right now it's difficult to judge which way it's going, but clearly it is not going the way he wanted it, which explains why he's put nuclear forces on alert. It's extreme. It's unbelievable that someone would do this, but he clearly wants to bring them back onto the table.
Dr. Mridula Ghosh, is that an assessment that you would agree with? Has Russia, in fact, then failed to achieve its objectives in the first 4 days of war? Are we seeing this as a result, perhaps, of the kind of pressure that President Putin is now under? How are we to read this latest development?
I would say there are a few factors we have to analyze. This is the conflict. And in any conflict, there is an escalation of rhetoric, escalation of course, of use of facts, use of information. And it is always objectivity that can. In any such action, the main thing, the road to peace, is lowering down that temperature, not escalating through any action or words, and slowly bring people to the table. Now, I hope this, that Zelensky agreeing is one of the steps that can be thought as a move, which is a positive move. I would not go into this debate of who is correct, which video footage is correct, because there's a lot of things happening. And there's a lot of disinformation from both sides, I should say. One needs to prove it just by blaming one side. And
if we Dr. Ghosh, if we just go by the fact that, Ukraine's largest cities still remain independent, there appears to have been some repulsion of Russian troops, at least at the very minimum.
It has been spectacular. The stiff resistance offered by the people, by the soldiers of the Ukrainian army, and a lot of people, as you know, there is a general mobilization. So many people are going and writing their names to these groups, and they are telling we are going to defend our soil, etc. So this is there, and Ukraine has, it's a weak country. Definitely, nobody will compare the potential of Russian military with that of Ukraine. Certainly, there is no comparison. But if you think that in these few days, yes, the major cities still remain unoccupied with the conventional set of weapons and other things being used. So is it therefore use of different other weapons? But I think no, because I think the new thing came up because of the other factors, that is the addition of certain other sanctions and other measures by by not just Ukraine but by other powers.
Okay, fair enough.
So
I think that's an important point you raise, and I want to take this back to Tatiana Kukareva, if I may. Tatiana, the fact that we've now seen Germany effect a major U-turn in its policy, it's now sending weapons to Ukraine, where we're looking at Italy doing an immediate payment of 110 million euros. Western powers coming together to say Russia is going to be blocked from the SWIFT global payment system. How is Moscow reacting to all of these developments?
I do believe that the reaction of Moscow is what we started this conversation with, because, look, end of the day, whatever we call it, if you call it an operation, if you call it, even if we call it, in theory, Russian aggression, you don't stop aggression with aggression, right? So the West actually coming together and saying, look, we kind of want to stop the war in Ukraine, but let's do this. Let's send in more military equipment. Let's send in more missiles. Let's just, that doesn't sound like something wanting to stop anything. That sounds like pouring gasoline onto a fire. And these messages are extremely, worrisome for us. And worrisome, for the fate of Ukraine as well, because, you have UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson calling for Ukraine to retaliate when, again, I do understand, again, the position of the people in Ukraine. Of course, everybody's scared. As for the resistance of the people, again, that's a very arguable position, because we haven't seen, as rightly mentioned by the esteemed doctors, rightly mentioned that the West has not been transmitting any sort of, counterposition, any sort of balanced position on this issue. They're transmitting the Ukrainian position. The Ukrainian position, unfortunately, just as is in times of war, incredibly questionable in this specific instance, because, we have reporters on the ground. We have people from those cities, specifically from Kharkiv, for instance, sending us pictures of, of those missile launches and everything, and clearly not that opposed to what's going on from the Russian side as you would like to portray it. In the meantime, we have Western leaders openly sending in more military equipment, more lethal equipment, and that does not sound, if they wanted to stop the conflict, they should have focused on bringing the Ukrainian side to the table.
Well,
that
appears to have happened right now, Tatiana Kukareva. They're saying they're ready for talks without preconditions, including having them in Belarus.
I'll believe it when I see them at those talks. And as you know pretty well, that the president is not going there. President Zelensky, who is, he's hiding out in Kiev, he's refused those talks twice now.
All right. Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens on the talks front. But a quick word in from Diksha Pandey, who spent all of last night in bunkers. She's a senior resident in neurology at the Sumy State University in Kiev. Dr. Pandey, at this point, what is it that you're hoping for? And tell us a little about your experiences.
My experiences have been devastating, ma'am, because last night we have experienced bombarding and shelling in the center of Sumy city. I'm living in the northeastern city, that is Sumy of Ukraine, and the situation has been worsening day by day since the 24th of February. But we were running out of money, food supplies, water, and everything. There is no one to help here. And embassy, I appreciate their work for us, but I would just make a small plea to them that please give a clear notice what you want us to do. You want us to get out of the residence, or you want to make us to stay in the residence? Because advisories are telling that there are certain trains, schedules have been provided, emergency trains and normal route trains from Kyiv to respective western cities. But are the people, or are the situations enough appropriate to travel in that case? It is so risky. We are even not able to go and get the groceries for ourselves. How do we expect to travel from city to city in such a critical situation? Like, is there no importance for our life or something? And sometimes they say just stay wherever you are. Like, what are we supposed to do? Whom are we supposed to trust here? No one is here to guide us in a proper manner. And people at the border are being troubled and harassed immensely. Girls have been pulled from hair and tortured. I don't know what's the reason of aggression there, but I really don't understand why they're just misguiding students everywhere.
Clearly disturbing images and accounts coming in from there. But I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this discussion.